Hello Kansas fans! Today we dive into a bit of a fan favorite. Not a hit, but a very well-known song when it comes to a Kansas aficionado, such as yourselves. It is the second track off of their fourth album titled Leftoverture, and it comes right after the finish line of their first real hit song, Carry On Wayward Son. The Wall leads us through a fanciful journey, detailing a protagonist's battle with barriers, both physical and mental, that get in the way of one's true purpose. And once that barrier is crossed, it is revealed to what the true reward is. And that reward is every single note, every single time change, every single chord progression, and a full, detailed musical analysis of Leftoverture's The Wall by Kansas. The Wall, not to be confused with the Pink Floyd project of the same name, is a 6-part song that runs through many different key changes, many different dynamic shifts, and even some rhythmic changes as well, that really help to set Kansas apart from its contemporaries in the 70s arena rock world. Another thing that sets this song apart is the guitar solo that comes right out of the gate. Usually you have to wait for that type of thing, but Kansas, they're not into foreplay like that other band, Boston, is. They just get straight to the point, let me tell you. Now, this song is basically, aside from a big guitar solo coming in from the beginning, is a basic song structure, right? Verse, pre-chorus, chorus, repeat, and then you get a little bridge section. The guitar solo comes back, and everything is peachy keen. Up until, of course, the orchestral style outro. Instrumental, by the way, and fully progged out to the max with very strange chord progressions. So it's not a normal song at all. The fact that Kansas has 6 members in the band is made apparent quite early on in this track. So let's check out what's going on with this intro guitar solo with some of the building blocks that makes up its orchestration. All 6 members play a role in the density of this introduction, with the obvious first layer being the guitar solo. Lots of tasty licks that we'll go over in much more detail shortly. Until then, let's break down the instrumentation with another lead instrument, the violin. A nice counterpoint melody to the guitar solo that taps into a more emotional space. These two parts interact with each other on top of the rhythm section, which consists of the piano. This gives it more percussive elements, plus adds some more arpeggiated triads to color in the progression. The organ plays along as well, and this as well, doing what an organ does best, be an organ. And underneath all of that, we finally have the bass and the drums laying down the rhythmic foundation. A very dense arrangement indeed, but there is plenty of space up above for the guitar solo to sing over, and this is due to its simple rhythmic structure. Now the first chord is a C sharp minor. That is the 1 chord, that's the tonic, moving to G sharp minor, which is the minor 5 chord. Usually in any kind of composition you'll have a major 5 chord. Instead, going back to a minor 1, that would be indicative of the harmonic minor scale, but here we're just using natural minor. Alright, so the 1 chord, C sharp, down to the 5 chord, G sharp minor. That goes around twice, and then we hit our first ending of this progression, which goes like this. Watch. Back to the C sharp, and then it repeats over again with the G sharp as well. But that progression right there, that little thing, is an A chord, which is the flat 6 chord. That's a totally natural chord. It occurs in C sharp minor. And then we have this. Oh, now that's very nice, isn't it? Very interesting. That is a B on top of an A. So it's basically extending the flat 6 chord as a Lydian mode. Now the Lydian mode just means you have the sharp 4th within the key. So it's a major scale with a sharp 4th, and that creates a tritone. Well, when you play a B chord on top of an A, it gives you that idea. Alright, so the tritone is in there. The Lydian sound. And then it goes like this. Right? When you play a C sharp minor triad on top of an A, it creates an A major 7. So that's the next chord, going right back down to the B. It's basically an extended flat 6 chord. You can argue that it's flat 6 to a flat 7, 6, 4, 2, which is basically an inverted 7th chord, 3rd inversion 7th chord, but I'm just going to say it's an extended flatted 6, alright, with a Lydian idea. Yeah. A very, very nice sound and characteristic of 70s arena rock, alright? There's a lot of songs that utilize that. Don't Stop Believin' by Journey is one of them, right? Not the chorus part, the pre-chorus, this. You know the part, don't play dumb. Anyway, moving on with that, we come back into C sharp minor, to G sharp minor, goes around twice, just like the first time. Okay, 1 to minor 5. Now here we have a very interesting thing. The bass line actually leads us down to F sharp and then into an E chord. Alright, so it actually uses that goes to an E major chord, which is the relative major of C sharp. But that is not the end of the story here, because whoa, we get a D major right after that. Now oftentimes whole step motions like this are very effective, so you can kind of go a whole step in any direction and have it sound kind of good. But in this case, doing it descending and then coming down another half step to C sharp, right? This tells me something completely different than just simply being a move stepwise, alright? So the E is pretty interesting. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But for now, I'm just going to say we go down to D, come down to to this, and then there's an F sharp minor on top of the C sharp, and then we move into this. Alright, so we just skip over the D and go right to D sharp, which, by the way, is the major 5 chord of our new key center, which is going to be G sharp minor. That's the start of the verse. Alright, so already we're changing keys. Alright, we changed keys once so far. Once we get to the E chord, that is a key change. Now let's talk about that E chord for a second. This E acts as the pivot chord to get us into our temporary new key, F sharp minor. The reason why we know this is F sharp minor is because all of the chords from this E major and beyond progression conform perfectly to that key center. The E is the flat 7th chord to F sharp minor. The D is the flat 6th chord to F sharp minor. And the C sharp is most definitively a 5 chord to F sharp minor. Which, by the way, in that progression, it goes to F sharp minor, right back into that C sharp major once again. This move between the 5 and the 1 chord like this is very common because both of these chords share a common tone, and that's the C sharp. And basically what's happening here is we're keeping the C sharp on the bass, so this 1 chord is F sharp minor in 2nd inversion, going back to C sharp. It has a very good sound to it. A lot of tension. Anyway, back to the E chord. Essentially what's happening here is a triple layer pivot chord that belongs to 3 separate keys. The first key is F sharp minor, which we covered this E as being the flat 7th. The second key is the previous chord, G sharp minor. The E major is mimicking what the A chord did for the C sharp minor just before. And let me show you what I'm talking about. So from the C sharp, A is the flat 6 chord. From the G sharp, E is the flat 6 chord. Alright, so imagine that part of the song. Listen. Instead of being on A, is on E. That E is basically playing along with the same function, and that's why it fits so well in this position. So this E chord acts as both the flat 7 and flat 6 simultaneously, which gives the illusion that everything is running smoothly, when in reality we have a pretty rugged modulation to explain. The third and final key this E chord comes from is simply C sharp minor, or better yet, E major, being the relative major of that key. The only chord in this progression that doesn't conform to F sharp minor is this D sharp, which actually, I told you before, acts as the major 5 chord going into the verse section, which is G sharp minor. But before we get to the verse section, we have to get into this absolutely beautiful guitar solo that comes in right off the rip. Definitely an epic approach and an epic way to start the song. Let's go lick by lick so we can get a deeper understanding of what's happening here. And that first lick really sets the tone. I'll play that slow for you. Oh yeah, tasty, tasty, tasty. Now, the first thing that I'm going to say about this is the rhythm is actually quite odd. Usually when a guitar solo rips in, it just rips in right at the top, maybe like something like that, right on the downbeat. But this actually waits until the upbeat of the second beat to come in. So the chords play for a couple of beats before the guitar even comes in. So it's like C sharp, boom. And I think that's pretty cool. That's definitely uncharacteristic of most guitar solos, I will say. Another thing to set this band apart. Continuing on beyond that, we have some hammer pulls here that equate to 30-second notes, alright? And that's basically like this. And at this nice slow tempo, that's a 30-second note. So we're actually already starting off this song with something way more difficult than we need, right? So, and to get that sound, you want to be picking these notes, and then do that hammer pull, and you have to pick that one. You have to actually sneak the pick in there, and then hit it again. I'd use the middle finger for that. Add a nice amount of vibrato on that last note, too. Now, theoretically speaking, what's going on here is on that second, this very last bend here, that release is actually right on the minor third of the G sharp. So very, very, very melodic right out of the gate. And not to mention on that C sharp minor, we're actually hitting some pretty cool jazz extensions, right? On top of the C sharp, we have the F sharp going to the minor third to the ninth, and then into the root, so. And then resolving beautifully into the third of the G sharp. So that's one thing you'll notice about this solo. It's incredibly melodic. And lick number 2 only reinforces that melodicism. Here we have a simpler lick that comes in on the downbeat of 3, which is pretty cool that they let the chord breathe a little bit before it comes in. Let me play that again for you. A very tasty and stylistic approach to this, because we're basically holding a bend at the beginning, and before we even play the note we have it bent, and then we release it, and then come down stepwise, with a nice little pull off there, and go in that nice big leap. Melodic leap. And guess what? That is basically doing the 5th, the flatted 3rd, and back to the 5th of the G sharp minor. So once again, pure melodicism, alright? I don't even know if melodicism is a word, but I don't care. I'm making it a word, alright? Actually, that's not a pull-off. I messed up. That's actually a slide. But even more liquid. That's the whole idea. And anytime you're holding out a note for a long period of time here, add some nice vibrato into the mix. Your neighbors and your aunt Hilda will really appreciate it. The violin plays a harmony a third higher than the guitar. Now, when you're listening to this, you have to understand. I recorded this on the guitar because, number one, I don't own a violin. And number B, even if I did own a violin, I wouldn't be able to play it. So just enjoy it on the guitar now, will ya? The violin plays the harmony up top. Notice how it's played more straight than the lead guitar. I did this to emulate the sound of the violin itself. which doesn't have the same style of vibrato as a guitar would have. This harmony outlines a third harmony above the root. So this C sharp extends all the way to G sharp all the way up top, which takes care of the range from third to major seventh, right? Remember, we have an A major seventh chord here. More Lydian action. Let's hear both harmonies together, well, in perfect harmony. Going beyond that, we hit into the next two cycles of C sharp minor and G sharp minor. And now with some more melodic bends with a little more aggression here. And a high one. Nice aggressive vibrato on that last one especially. Now, pretty much all that's happening is we're scaling up from the flat third and then bending up 2 times to the 5th of the C sharp minor chord, which is also the root of the G sharp minor chord. Alright, so you're holding out a note that's common to both chords. And then we got to hit this big one. And the root always sounds good. That's a high C sharp, by the way. So that's going to sound good no matter what, because that's our key center. And it's also the perfect one to add a little bit of extra stank to it. You know what I'm saying? Like Robbie Steinhardt's beard probably stank like fish and raw eggs. The next lick marks the end of the C sharp minor key center. But it also goes out with a bang. And that's the whole thing there, right? Straight 16th notes running through the entire thing in a very odd pattern as well, alright? That whole thing basically outlines a C sharp minor ninth, right? You have the root, the flat 7th, going all the way down to the flat 3rd, to the 9th. Now a 9th sounds beautiful, by the way. That's what it sounds like on top. And when you add the minor 3rd in there, it sounds very, very dissonant. But when you play it separately, it sounds almost angular. Alright, so a very cool sound on part of this guitar solo. And then we go down all the way down to the B with a little bluesiness right there. Whoa, that's a flat 5 in there. Watch here. But it's quickly resolving to the 5th. Alright, so it's not like it's hanging on that tritone forever, or that blue note we'll call it. It does resolve relatively quickly. Alright, so let's get those notes again. Watch. Now most of this is alternate picked except for that little resolution. That's hammered, alright? And then basically we go like this. A very interesting lick, I must say. Just follow the tab exactly and you'll see what I'm saying. You skip from C sharp, and then you double up on that E, slide, and basically play the first 5 notes of an E major chord, which, by the way, anticipates the E major chord that's about to happen. Genius. Now let's take a look at the violin harmony being played underneath. The roles have been reversed. Let's hear the violin part. This harmony rests on the 3rd and 5th of the E and D chords, G sharp to B for E, and F sharp to A for D. This continues into the 5th of C sharp, so the pattern is basically using parallel 5ths. And that sounds like this. Sounds kind of silly when you play it like that. The F sharp minor arpeggio is laid down in the next lowest register from the solo, and then hangs on the major 3rd of the C sharp chord. This is capped off with a very nice whole step resolution to D sharp, which is played in unison with the guitar. A really great way to drive the 5 chord home. So with all that in mind, let's listen to the entire guitar solo, but this time with the violin part playing alongside of it. It's a whole different animal when the 2 parts are playing together. Enjoy. honestly a very breathtaking and epic solo. And it's only the first section. We have a whole heck of a lot more to cover in this song. Imagine that, a prog rock song that's got a lot of parts to go over, especially beyond the intro. I can't believe it. We have an introduction that lasted all this time already. Boy, time flies when you're having fun. Anyway, let's get into the first verse, which basically has this solo clavinet keyboard playing, and that is the only instrument laying down the harmony. This part was originally played on a clavinet keyboard, a solo clavinet keyboard. It's the only instrument that happens during this part, which is kind of crazy. And it's meant to simulate the sound of a harpsichord, I believe, which is kind of crazy because usually you'd associate the clavinet with acts like Stevie Wonder, right? Most prominently known on Superstition or Higher Ground, right? We'd associate it with the likes of funk. More like play that funky music, white boy, not play that epic goddamn prog rock, white boy, if you know what I'm saying. But anyway, I digress. It's just an excellent, excellent juxtaposition of that instrument because you don't hear a clavinet in that setting ever. And yet here it is on display in full force, emulating that of a harpsichord. Now, in this section there's no guitar to be found, so I'm going to have to use this bad boy to play some block chords to, you know, basically get us through this entire chord progression. So we got a lot of chords and of course a lot of modulations as well. So ostensibly this first G sharp minor is the 1 chord, alright? Moving in a fantasy with a very basic 1, 2, 3 vocal line on top. Alright, that's just a straight up minor chord. We can call that the 1 for now. And then we immediately hit into this. This is basically a D sharp minor, which is the minor 5 chord, but in first inversion. Alright, so there's actually an F sharp on the bottom of it, laying down the bass line, which lends to a very nice sound between the G sharp minor. Listen. 1, 2, 5, 6 we'll call that, or minor 5, 6. Now you can argue that this is where the first key change happens because we go right to an F sharp in second inversion. Alright, so the F sharp is on top of a C sharp bass, which then goes right to B major 7. Alright, now B major 7 is not really a problem in G sharp minor. And neither are any of these other chords, by the way. The D sharp minor over F sharp is basically a substitute for an F sharp chord anyway, and then it goes to an F sharp chord, so that all makes sense. But the B going to this, which is basically a 6 chord, alright, with a sharp 11th. Alright, now a sharp 11th or sharp 4th is indicative of the Lydian mode, which by the way, is indicative of a 4 chord, alright, or a flat 6 chord, better yet. I almost sound like a seal there. Not the guy with the craters in his face, but just me, a regular seal. Anyway, I gotta get back into this whole spiel here. So, get that B major 7. We could say that's a flat 6 now to D sharp minor. Alright, so that you could say is our temporary modulation here. We have a flat 6, and the same deal. It's that tritone type of thing. It's that Lydian progression that we saw earlier, but with a slightly different flavor, right? We're starting on the B major 7, then going to the 6 chord with the sharp 11th in it. And that's basically just taking this line and putting it on top of the B. Listen. Very nice sound while keeping the other tones pretty much the same. So that basically I'm going to say is straight up a flat 6, because guess what happens next? We go to the 5 in B flat, a half step below where we just were. Alright, so we basically had that B major 7 with the 6, and then going right here, a half step down to this really cool little cadence here. So it's basically basically going to a 5 chord, but it's a fake out 5 chord because the chord on top is actually an E flat with a sus4 resolving to an E flat major. Whoa, okay. I just said we were in E flat minor. Now all of a sudden it's E flat major. All right, so we're mode mixing here. We're using both notes within D sharp major or E flat major or minor, right? Because the first part was D sharp minor, E flat minor, whichever you want to call it, and basically taking the flat 6 from that key, and now we're in the 5 of that key, but we're using that note to stage that modulation temporarily. It's very colorful. It goes sus4 and then into a regular B flat chord, which is clearly the 5 chord. Alright, so there's no mistaking that whatsoever. Now basically we're getting prepared to modulate into E flat major. That's what this is telling us, okay? So it's foreshadowing all of this stuff. But before we hit that, we have to basically get into the pre-chorus section, which goes like this. There's your resolution into E flat major. Now because we're going into E flat major, I'm actually going to call this C flat. I know that's going to drive some of you crazy, but because a C is a type of 6 in an E flat environment, alright? So we have to use C flat, and B is already taken as a B flat, so we have to use C flat here, alright? Sorry, it's just musical semantics, it has to happen. And we're doing the same exact chord progression that we saw in the introduction with the A chord. Remember this? Well, we're just up a whole step from there. And that time though, we do go all the way up and resolve into an E flat major. Now this is called a whole tone resolution. It basically just means you have a C flat that goes a whole step to a D flat, which goes a whole step to an E flat. And there's your epic resolution into the first chorus, by the way. The chorus continues with a similar vibe, continuing on with that solo clavinet part playing mostly by itself. But in this chorus we also introduce an organ that fades in very, very, very subtly and then becomes more apparent as the chorus goes on. So let's listen to chorus 1 and see what the hell is happening. Once again, we have a set of chords that modulate using mode mixture. And here it starts out very inviting. Here, I'll play it for you. We have E flat, F minor 7, E over G or E flat over G, E flat minor over G flat, to E, to B or C flat, D flat, E flat, for it to start over again, okay? So this first E flat chord, that's the 1 chord, which then comes nicely with this nice tempo, nice hoppy tempo, right? It's like a really slow rabbit. Ooh, ah, ooh, yes. Sunny day in the green, green grass. Here's that F minor 7. That's the 2 chord. That's just 2-7. Very simple, very easy. And then we go here, which is an E flat over a G. That is a 1-6 chord. So that's a first inversion 1 chord. Nothing to see here, man. Just very nice. Do, re, mi. But then, right after that, it goes down a half step and switches to a minor chord. So E flat minor right now, which I'm going to call this the minor 1 because obviously that's what we're playing around with here. Which then resolves very, very nicely to E, a whole step down. And that E can kind of be seen as a flatted 2. But if we call it a flatted 2, then we have to call it an F flat, since we're in the key of E flat, right? So a flatted 2, F flat major, very, very interesting, going to C flat major, D flat, whole tone resolution to do it over again, alright? So very, very, very cool the way that these half steps and whole steps are used to get us between different varying mode mixtures. Now, that E chord or the F flat can be seen as a flatted second, but a better way to look at this is that it's going to the flatted 6 of the key. So you can call it a 4 of the flat 6, all right, which then goes flat 7, 1. Totally cool, all right? So one more time, got that 1, 2 minor 7, 1 6, 1 6 minor, okay? And then E or F flat, which is the flatted 2, or better yet, the 4 of this chord right here, the flatted 6. Flat 6, C flat, flat 7, 1, with a very nice little arpeggio, ending with that clavinet. An absolutely brilliant chorus section to bring us through the main form of the song. And let's not forget about the vocals either. They go along perfectly with the chord progression. Check this out, ready? All I am and all that I would ever want to be, it's just a travesty. You see what happened there? All of those notes went perfectly with the chord progression, right? That first melodic E flat is actually on top of the F minor 7th, right? But that's perfectly fine. And then right into the 5th of the chord. Then arpeggiating up the minor chord, which, by the way, he purposefully avoided the major third of the E flat because that would sound like doo-doo poopy, all right? And he did that to trick you into thinking he was magically in another key. So kudos to these guys for being absolutely brilliant. Let's now take a look at the second verse and see what other elements are added into the orchestration to beefing it up a little bit and to add a little bit more dynamics. Verse 2 consists of piano, organ, violin, bass, and some subtle ride cymbal. The bass part simply plays the same notes that were outlined by the clavinet in verse 1, with a few little rhythmic fills here and there to give it more movement. The organ, of course, does what an organ does. Be an organ. Haha. The piano here is probably the most critical element aside from the rhythm section, as it serves to replace the clavinet from the first verse. And one other thing that deserves its own little section is the violin part played by Robbie Steinhardt. I'll play it with the piano and bass part. Overall, it's a very melodic bit that hits on a chord tone every single time. When the first B pedal hits, a descending Lydian line follows. Once it ascends, the E flat chord hits and the violin jumps way up to the higher register. And after it hits its peak, it descends instead of ascends, a B Lydian scale. Probably the most shocking part of this second chorus is that we actually have a clean guitar part that comes in. Holy cow, we get to play an actual guitar part. An extremely subtle and hard to hear little arpeggio line that goes right along with the chords to a T. And it actually starts with a big old dumb power chord on E flat right here, the 6th fret of the A string. Watch. Those first 3 chords, E flat 5, that's the power chord, and then using the top note and then switching the middle note gives us an F minor 7. Look, F, A flat, E flat. And then we just go right up with the bass line. That's a nice first inversion chord, just like in the actual progression. And then immediately we do this kind of fancy shape. Alright, this is almost like a 6-chord shape. This is like if we're playing an E flat 6, but we're not. Playing an E flat minor, okay, in first inversion. What am I talking about? An E flat 6? That doesn't make any sense at all. This would actually be more like a, what is this note here? An F sharp 6. I'm sorry. major. That's also the relative major. But we're hitting an E flat minor chord in first inversion and just going straight up. Bringing that top note a whole step into this. Very, very nice. That's just a straight up E triad, right? 999. We've seen that before. Okay, and then we go right down to the bottom of this nice B chord shape, right? Which comes from the bar chord, right? But we're just playing from the D string. And then we hit the root note of D flat and then start playing it again. Second ending, we do this. Yeah, we actually have a little bit of slidey characteristic in there, and you're basically just doing that the whole tone resolution from B to C sharp or C flat to D flat, and then sliding into E flat major just like that. All right, using essentially first inversion triads, but that's not what's going on musically. It's only what's going on in the guitar. And after that high E flat rings out, we come into the very first bridge section, which has more of an atmospheric vibe, really brings down the dynamic, and doesn't necessarily make the instrumentation any simpler though. Take a listen. There are also other instruments that are crucial to tying up this section, but for now let's just go over the guitar part because it largely encapsulates the harmonic functions that we're looking to uncover here. And here they are very slowly. We have B major 7. Beautiful. F sharp 9, or add 9. Then we have this diminished. Okay, we'll talk about that. And then this nice little major to sus2 back resolution, all right? And then of course we end with these two chords. Well, let's just start with that first chord. We're basically on the flat 6 again with a B major 7. Check it out. Very, very nice sound. It's beautiful. And rhythmically here, I have to tell you a little secret, all right? Not only is this, you know, a 4 chord, right, which is pretty simple, but this is in an odd time signature, which I know that sounds crazy, and that'll be made more apparent when we go over the piano part because that's really what's moving through this. But yeah, it's actually in a 3/4, 2/3, 1/2/3, and a 3/16 measure. Are you kidding me? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then right into the next chord, which then goes to 4/4 after that. Every other chord is in 4/4. That kind of blew my mind. I had no idea that was like that, and I was really in for it at that point. So we can call this the 4 chord, the B major 7, to the 1 chord, add 9. Okay, very, very beautiful sound. And then here, we're basically using this as a leading tone to get to C sharp major. All right, so we're really looking to get to there as our 1 chord. All right, now it's not really a 1 necessarily. It is it's a 5 chord to the F sharp. All right, because the B major 7 is a 4, and then we have the 1 being the F sharp. Once we hit this, that's C diminished. All right, so that's a leading tone coming up to the 5 chord. All right, so you can even see that as an altered secondary dominant chord. I'm not going to. I'm just going to say that's a fully diminished leading tone going to a C sharp major, which then goes to this, which is a G sharp sus to G sharp major. All right, now that is the secondary dominant, but it's not being treated as the secondary dominant anymore. It's actually faking us out to go back to C sharp as the 1 chord. All right, so really, C sharp is the 5 chord. The G sharp is supposed to be the 5 of 5, but instead of going back to 5, it just goes back to minor 1, because we're allowed to do that. All right, you're allowed to take something that's a 5 of anything and just make it a 5 pretty much whenever you want. as long as you know that you can get away with it. And guess what? These guys were able to get away with a lot during those years, all right? And yeah, pretty awesome. So this does lead into another guitar solo, but before we get into that, we have to talk about the orchestration going on in this bridge. The other critical element of this bridge is the call and response aspect delivered to us by the guitar, which is the call, and the bass plus the glockenspiel as the response. That's right, you heard right, a glockenspiel. Totally nuts. Well, either way, the bass and glockenspiel play in unison and just arpeggiate the same chords outlined by the guitar in a more sparse and syncopated manner. And after that build-up into the solo, we have to get into the, well, solo. It has a similar vibe to the intro solo, but it is much simpler and it's also much shorter as well. Here's lick number 1. It's a blues lick. Check it out. Woo. Very, very nice sound to that. I'll play it again. And although that very first part is a blues lick, it's still very consonant sounding. It's not like they're outlining that blue note as, you know, extremely as some other acts would at the time, right? Although Kansas is known to play the blues pretty damn well, I gotta say. But this is pretty much a whole step bend. So fully consonant, going through those intervals, and then going right to the flat 7, which is a beautiful, beautiful note to hit. But it's not necessarily the flat 7th because it's landing on the G sharp minor, which is the minor 3rd. And then hopping up an octave and bending it a whole step back into its original note. That's the same exact note. So it's just 2 octaves of the minor 3rd. Very, very nice sound. Now, that big octave jump plus the full step bend gives us an interval of a 9th, which is a very proggy interval, by the way. So that's a pretty wide spread, a wide span, if I say so myself. All right, so one more time. Just tasty, and make sure you add enough vibrato on that big note at the end, all right? We follow that up with another tasty lick. And check it out, we actually have to start off with a 1.5 bend. Watch. Kind of a unique take on such a lick, all right? You've heard something similar in other songs, but this is done in a way that is, like I just said, very unique. We have to actually pre-bend all the way up to the note E from C sharp. That's a 1.5 steps, okay? So this 14th fret is not going to be like this. That's a half step. Not this. That's a whole step, but this. Alright, without all that nastiness in the G string, right? The nastiness in the G string. The nastiness is always in the G string, isn't it? Isn't that strange? The world works in mysterious ways. But, yeah, we have to pre-bend all the way up to that E, as if we're playing it like this. Alright, but it's like this. And then you have a little pull-off going right back into the root. That's just outlining a C sharp minor 7. And then we go like this, a little boo-doo-boo, boo-doo-boo, but we start off here. Alright, so that's basically a B to C sharp. Very angular sounding, almost sounds like we're about to play a King Crimson song. But we quickly capitulate back into that chord and hit a very nice 5th on top of the G sharp minor. So, that whole thing, once again. And then you just hold it out just like the first one. The guitar and violin harmony also come back in for a repurposing, but this time very truncated. So while the solo is less exciting than the intro solo, it does fulfill its role in bringing back something that is familiar. Alright, that C sharp minor to G sharp minor from the beginning is very long gone. all right? It's been lost this entire time. But after meandering into all these different directions, we come back in perfectly with the perfect way, all right, of bringing this section back. So overall, it was the right move to shorten it because that would make it seem a little redundant, I think. If they played through the entire intro again, it would be a little bit too much. So I believe that they did indeed make the right move in that regard. The only other aspect of chorus 3 that we have to go over here is the addition of one extra chord that's laid down at the very end that helps us transition into the final section. And that chord is right here. It's actually two chords. It's basically a C sus4 to a C major in that position on the 3rd fret and 5th fret. Now this basically acts as a 5 chord, a new 5 chord that will set up the new 1, or the new key center of the final section of the song, which is going to start in F. Alright, so basically brings us out of there. Let me play it all the way from the beginning. Here we go. Second ending. There's E flat, we go down a step and a half, which then goes perfectly into an F major chord. Alright, so you can basically, as long as the motion makes sense, right? Here it's a step and a half to get down to C from E flat, and that makes the 5 chord work. Yeah, we're allowed to do that, all right? That's because in E flat major, we actually have a C within it, all right? So anytime you have a note within a scale, you're allowed to use that note in any way, shape, or form that you wish, all right? So in this case, we're just turning it into a 5 chord, right? So we're taking it from what would ordinarily be the relative minor of E flat and turning it into the 5 chord. Okay, a major chord, which then goes to another major chord. The final section of the wall is basically the payoff. Everything we've been waiting for up until this point. A beautiful instrumental section with one of the greatest melodies and chord progressions I've ever heard in my entire life. And that's going through a lot of chord progressions. It is both beautiful and epic. It's a very lengthy section, so I'll be splitting it into 3 smaller bits to make it a little bit easier to understand. Now the format will be as such. I'm going to play back the section. We'll hear it from front to back, whatever section it is, certain length of time. And if there is a guitar, I will include it within that. Also accompanying it, or the guitar is accompanying this part, would be the violin and synthesizer lead that happens on the top, which is basically the main melody of this part. After that, we'll go over the chords, we'll learn how to play them, all the functions, blah 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 blah, go over the melodic content, harmonic content, and then I'll go over any other parts of the orchestration that is pertinent to our discussion. The main chord progression during this section is layered with an organ, synth strings, and a clean guitar, all playing the chords. The first part starts on an F, right? You just play like an F bar chord there. Basically, the melody comes up major 7th and to the root before it changes chords. So, 2, 3, which then goes right to the G on top of the F. Alright, now this G over F is actually an inverted 7th chord, alright? A 3rd inversion G 7th chord. So that means that we have a G chord on top of an F, basically, which I said from the beginning. But so this kind of muddies the waters a little bit, right? Because the F is presumably a 1 chord, but a G over an F is not really considered any form of function that matters, right? You can't just say it's a major 2 chord, which then would go to C as the 5 chord, right? No, that's not what's going on here. This is basically an immediate modulation. And it's also called using modes. Alright, so this, the G on top of the F indicates a Lydian mode. Because within that, you have a B natural, that's the Lydian sharp fourth, right? And as the chord, it sounds like that. Right, so it sounds very cool. It just sounds very tense, but kind of epic too, like you're flying through the air. So we're going to call that, you can say this is the 4 going to the 5 chord, really, if you want. And then the C is technically the 1, but it's inverted. So we're creating more tension. And then essentially after that it goes right to a D major chord over an F sharp. Okay, now the D major chord really throws a monkey wrench into this because we can't say we're in F or any form of F anymore. We can't even say we're in the key of C anymore because F, G, and C are in the same key, but D is not. However, you can say that it is a secondary dominant. It's the 5 to the 5 chord, which is G major, alright? But I'm going to say we're using the 5 of 5 as just a regular 5, and then going right to our new key, G major, alright? I say that we've modulated here, okay? So we have F, which could be considered 4 to 5, or a Lydian 1, 4, 5, resolving to 1, 6, 4, and then going to 5 of 5, but it's really just a 5 chord getting ready to modulate to G, which is our 1 chord, alright? Which then makes way for the E minor chord, right? E minor 7th, that's the 6th chord, right? Melodically, it comes back into the D over F sharp, so that's a recurring chord. And then here, big arpeggio, that's like an E minor with an 11th on top, but it's more like an E minor sus4, going down to the flatted 3rd, to the 9th, and then using E as a melodic note to get into A. Alright, so it's also an A major, so you can say that now, once you hit that E minor chord the second time, it's actually a 2 chord, alright? Sneak different functions in here to get to different chords that wouldn't ordinarily relate to what you're doing, okay? So I would say that that makes the E minor a 2 chord at this point. Before it was a 6, now it's a 2 because it goes to A major, which then goes to over G, which is A7 on top of a G, alright? Or A over G, which then resolves to D major. So that means that this is just the 5 chords. You have a 2, 5, with the 7th, 1. There you go. 2, 5, 1. Doesn't get any simpler than that. And that brings us to the end of that section. One more time without all the pauses. Very nice melody, and all of those melodic notes link those chords together absolutely perfectly, even as we're skipping through all these different modes and different key centers. So hopefully you didn't get lost listening to that. Let's take a little ride through the chord progression with some of the different instruments that support the melody, starting with the organ. As always, just doing what an organ does best, be an organ. Playing alongside this is a vintage synth string patch to fatten it up a bit. Add the guitar into the mix and we have an entire rhythm section minus the bass. Section 2 of this outro continues with the same orchestration, except the clean guitar gets a little bit louder. And we're basically in our 3rd key center at this point, I want to say. Could be 4th, who knows, who's keeping track? Well, I'm supposed to be keeping track, but you'll know if you actually pay attention to the analysis. Here's section 2. Ironically enough, those first two chords that are played in this section are actually in Pink Floyd's The Wall, which is kind of funny. If you listen to the very first track, different groove, but it's the same sort of deal, right? Let me show you what that deal is. And this part starts on a nice big old easy D chord. Look at this. Isn't that beautiful? I can't believe we're actually able to do this right now. It's supposed to be more complicated than that. But basically it's a D in that rhythm, and then that's an E on top of a D. That's the same relationship we've been seeing throughout the entire song. Alright? It started out at the beginning with the A to B. Right? Here we're just not going to the major seventh. Where else did it happen? It happened all over the place in this song. What the heck is going on? Holy cow. During the first part of the instrumental, right? The F over F and the G over F is also where it happened. In the verses, right? With the B chord. All of these are the exact same function. It's just a Lydian function because we're adding the sharp fourth in there by taking the entire chord that we have. So say we have D here. You move D up a whole step, you get E. Just moving the whole shape upward and creating that tension, all right? And that's that sharp 4, okay? And a 6 and a 9, a 69 in there. Haven't got to make any 69 jokes here, but I'm sure there's going to be one involving the lead singer and the violin player. But I'm not going to go too far into that kind of nonsense, all right? We then hit an A chord on top of a C sharp, all right? So we use this D to create tension underneath both of those chords. We can call that 4 to 5, right? In some capacity, or 4 to 5, 6, 4, 2, to denote a third inversion 7th chord. But then that D moves a half step down to C sharp and resolves to an A chord, which is pretty cool, right? Now, it's funny because the D chord is actually the 1 chord here, all right? Because we do return and drop down a D major scale, because the next one is a B minor, that's the 6th chord. Then we go back to A, which is the 5 chord at this point. Then G, which is the 4 chord, or you can call it the flat 6 to B minor, which then goes to the 5 of the 6, the 5 of the B minor, right? So this is telling me that D is actually 1, and then the E is a 5 of 5 to A, which then resolves very nicely into the 5 chord. This is the actual 5 chord, which then goes to a deceptive cadence, which that means you go to the 6 instead of the 1, right? A non-deceptive cadence would sound like this, right? A over C sharp going to D. Here, we're going to the minor, the relative minor, so it's called a deceptive cadence. And then this just drops down from the 6 to a 5 in root position, to a 4 chord, all right? And then right into this, F sharp sus. Now that is the 5 of the 6 chord, because we're going right to a B major after that, buddy. All right, so and that B is now a 5 chord, a new 5 chord, to set up the next one, our final key center of the entire song, okay? So going back and looking at that again, we got D, then the A over C sharp, a little more frequent, scaling down, and a big stop. Do-do-do. Very nice, all those different modes working together to get in and out of all those different key centers. Very, very nice. Continues the melody along perfectly. So let's get a little chord melody out of that. So essentially we're coming out of this, then explicitly using that G sharp, even after we came with F sharp, G to A, right? Because we were coming out of the key of E minor into this new key to resolve into that melodic A, but immediately going to G sharp right after that. And then using the Lydian mode to get down to a melodic E. last one's an F sharp. Well, guess what? The chord we're playing is an F sharp. Going to the same note, which is also in a B chord, so that's a common tone right there. Alright, so the F sharp is shared between F sharp sus4, obviously is the root, and the B major, which it has it as the 5th, alright? Which then, that 5 chord goes to E eventually. So let's just play that one more time, no stops. Ready? Very cool. Alright, now it's time to hit section 3, the last and final section of Kansas's The Wall. Alright, now this part, the guitar drops out technically, okay? So we're going to have to do things a little bit differently for this section, but listen through anyway to what I've compiled here for the final remaining finale of this song. Alright, here we are at the final section here, and I had to just sit down at the organ for a little bit because it just sounds nice, and you know what? I was getting sick of playing the guitar here. And plus there's no guitar in this section at all, so let's take a look at what's going on with this chord progression first. I'll start off with talking about the first 4 chords that we're going through. We basically have an E major, which is our new 1 chord, to an A minor on top of a pedal E, so we just keep that E static on the bottom, and then we do this. Alright, that is an E6 on top of an E, another 1 chord, and then back to A minor over E. So essentially we have 1, and then 4, the 4 minor 4 chord, so mode mixture. The A minor comes from E minor, really. So since we have an E major, we're changing that 4 chord to the E minor 4, alright? And then right after that, what's really interesting is that this note, the top note, comes up chromatically to a C sharp, which turns this into an E6 chord, alright? Very vaudeville style, if I must say. You know, late 19th century, early 20th century, you know? What eventually led to all those swing dances, if you know what I'm saying. Alright, but anyway, I digress. So this top line, the melody goes from a B to a C natural, C sharp, and then back down to a C natural. It's almost like the James Bond theme, alright? But it's on top of this chord progression. So the B is the 5th of the E, the C natural is the 3rd, then the C sharp is the 6th. It just adds another extra dimension of color here, and something you don't always see very often because you have to be kind of slick with stuff like that. And because we have that chromatic motion, you can do it very slickly indeed. Pretty cool, man. I love that sound. Now the last part, the second half, we basically hit back on the E chord, and then we're going downward to a D, not a D, a B chord over a D sharp. Alright, so that's a 1 chord, a 5 in first inversion, because we're just going stepwise with the bass line, right? E to D sharp, and then it goes down C sharp, which is just the 6. Alright, so we're going from major to the 5 chord to the relative minor, which is the 6 chord, and then immediately go into the flat 6, alright? Now the flat 6 just comes from the key of E minor, so we're mixing modes again. This is actually one of the more simplistic parts to understand in this entire part. For all the other ones, we have to kind of like mix and match keys and figure out what's going on. This is just strictly within E major and E minor. That's all these chords are coming from, alright? So we don't really have to worry too much about that. But when we hit that C chord, we're basically in a Lydian mode. Okay, because we have the sharp fourth on top of there. So let's listen to what that sounds like. We have E, B over D sharp, C sharp minor, C. A lot of weight to it. And then the final chord before the resolution is A minor 7th, which then kind of turns into a minor 9th, which then resolves right into, boom, that big E major chord is the finale. Epic. Alright everybody, that's going to be the end of today's video detailing The Wall by Kansas. Thank you so much for coming along this journey. This has been a very tricky one, a very harmonically difficult number, alright? So it's been fun trying to dig through all this stuff and really get into the nitty-gritty here, alright? Alright, if you'd like to further support the channel, please go to either my Patreon or Subscribestar and you can donate a certain amount per month. There's basically tiered rewards that you get depending on how much or how little that you decide to donate monthly. You can also leave a tip on the PayPal if you like what's going on. Just like, comment, subscribe, share the video out. That's how we can grow this channel. I promise though, I will never be the guy to water down any of the entertainment here. We're going hard and deep on every single one of these episodes, and I can't stress how important that is enough. Alright, so that's exactly what we're going to be doing. Yeah, the other way you can support is if you're looking for any kind of private instruction or tutoring in the music department, either, you know, keyboards or guitars or, you know, anything really, music theory based, I'm your guy. Go to RomanOvamusic.com, click on the big red button. You can get right in contact with me by sending me an email through there, and, you know, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But, yeah, until then, hey, thanks a lot. And I'll see you on the next one. Not sure exactly which one's going to come out next on the channel, but on this album, if you own it, and you know what track 3 is on Kansas's Leftoverture, you know exactly what I'm going to be doing next, alright? So I'm going to stop rambling now. Thank you very much, and I will see you around.